Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon,
Looks
Liz.
like, looks like we've still got one or two committee members. Hi, Representative Newsom. Thanks for joining us. Waiting on Mr. McGagn. We'll give him another minute. Okay, we're trying to locate Mr. McGagna. He's traveling, so Jess has reached out to him to see if we can get him on board, but I think we should go ahead and get started, given our time is really limited today. So, um, thanks everybody for being here. Let's go ahead and I'll ask LSO to do a roll call.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman. Senator Baldwin,
Present.
Senator Guru,
Here.
Representative Newsom,
Here.
Representative Winter,
Here.
Director Nesvik,
Here.
Director Miyamoto,
Here.
Ms. Johnson,
Here.
Chairwoman Storer,
Here.
and Mr. McGagna will be on shortly.
Hopefully excused for the moment. Thanks very much. I just have some brief opening remarks, and then after that, LSO is going to walk us through the two bill drafts included in the meeting materials that are the result of our conversations in late June in Lander. We may also talk about other ideas if if the group decides to do so. We will take public comment. I'll explain my thoughts about that in just a moment. It will be limited given our time frame, but and then after that we will provide process for deciding what we want to recommend to the Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee as tasked. Does anyone have any questions about the agenda? Representative Newsom.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Storr. I would like to suggest that during public comment, we ask people to comment on the proposed bills and not comment on the incident, but to keep their comments to the proposed bills and how those could be improved.
Very good. Thanks. I would open that up to say that, well, I'll just kind of make a note here in my comments as well that there are a lot of people joining us, and we do really continue to hear from people across the state and across the country on this issue, which is why I felt it was important that we take public comment at this time on the proposed legislation before moving forward with a recommendation. Most of the comment I think we can characterize as that we've received to date, the written comment, that the draft bills that we have do not go far enough in addressing the wanton animal cruelty as we have been directed by TRW and the governor to do. So I will expand a little bit on Representative Newsom's recommendation that to stick to legislation, but if rather than the incident, but also feel free to expand on what you would like to see in legislation. I think I will just summarize that the comments received to date failed to address the legality of running over an animal, a predatory animal, with a vehicle. And some concern also over explicitly codifying such behavior in statute in order to require a reasonable effort to kill an animal injured by such activities. Bills also, I think, comments have been received that don't increase the penalty for the failure to do so in a particularly meaningful way. But we will go ahead and walk through the drafts, then move to public comment. We are going to limit that to 30 minutes, and with the number of people that have signed up, we're going to ask everyone to limit their comments to 2 minutes each. And not everyone who has signed up will be able to speak, I'm afraid to say, but we will likely be able to hear from people within the state primarily. So that's the plan. And I see that Mr. McGagna has been able to join us. Thank you, Jim. Any other opening remarks from the committee? Sounds good. All right. Well, Luke, if you will walk us through the two draft bills, 25 LSO 0139 and 0140. That would be great. Thanks.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Luke Plum, LSO. I here to discuss, first I'll begin with 25 LSO 139, requirements for the taking of predatory animals. This bill draft focuses on Title 23, which are the game and fish statutes, and it primarily amends Wyoming Statute 23.3.103. And it makes a few changes throughout there. Beginning on page 2 of the bill draft, in subsection A, the word humane was inserted into the language that predatory animals and predaceous birds may be taken without a license in any humane manner and at any time except as provided by other various statutes relating to the taking of wildlife. And then there's a newly created subsection C, and this is the primary language of the bill that was recommended by the working group at the last meeting in Lander. And it says any person who intentionally injures or disables a predatory animal by the use of an automotive vehicle, motor propelled wheeled vehicle, or vehicle designed for travel over snow, shall, upon inflicting the injury or disability, immediately use all reasonable efforts to kill the injured or disabled predatory animal. And so then beginning at the very end of page 2 and then taking up all of page 3 onto page 4, I just made a staff comment to just note some of the language that's used in this newly created paragraph. And first, it's the use of the automotive vehicle, motor propelled wheeled vehicle, or vehicle designed for travel over snow. that language comes from Wyoming Statute 233306A. And I would just note that this is the only place in statute where that language is used, but it is used in relation to predatory animals and the use of vehicles in that manner. And so the working group may wish to consider whether that term needs further defined, or if there's a different alternative for motor vehicle that may be inserted. I provided language from Wyoming Statute 31-101A15, and that's the definition of motor vehicle in the motor vehicle statutes. And I just gave an excerpt of that because it does include off-road recreational vehicle. That term defines motor vehicle and then provides a very long list of different types of motor vehicles, things such as a bus, a moped, a motorcycle. But then it does go in subparagraph K. It defines that an off-road recreational vehicle is designed for off-road use. There's just various other definitions in there. So I just wanted to highlight that for the committee. Snowmobile, as an additional one, is defined under 32-2401A2 as any mechanically driven vehicle of a type which utilizes sled-type runners or skis or any endless belt tread or combination of these designed for operation over snow. So just a consideration there for that term. And at the top of page 4, I just briefly mentioned this bill draft uses the term and requires that a person who is injured or disabled a predatory animal must use all reasonable efforts to immediately kill that animal. It really up for the working group's consideration whether a term such as use all reasonable efforts should be further defined for clarity. That would be up to your determination. Continuing on page 4, the previous subsection C has been renumbered as D, and this is the penalty provision. And currently just required that any person who takes a fur-bearing animal or game bird without the appropriate license, unless otherwise provided, is guilty of a low misdemeanor. And with this bill draft, it inserts that any person who violates subsection C of this section, so any person who does not use all reasonable efforts to kill an injured or disabled predatory animal, would be subject to a low misdemeanor, which in the game and fish statutes carries a penalty of a $1,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail or both. And then about halfway through on page 4, beginning on line 15, I also made a conforming amendment to Wyoming Statute 23306, which we discussed previously, where states that no person shall harass, pursue, hunt, shoot, or kill any Wyoming wildlife except predatory animals subject to Wyoming Statute 233103C. So with that requirement. On page 5, I would just note that section 2, beginning on line 11, is an applicability section and just requires that this act only applies to any person who injures or disables a predatory animal on and after July 1st, 2025, which is the effective date of this act. And with that one, I can proceed on to the next bill, or if there are any questions, be happy to address those.
Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I got a comment from one of my constituents that also suggested that we look at 23-1-103, ownership of wildlife. And in the last sentence of that, so the whole thing is pretty short, it says, for all purposes of this act, all wildlife in Wyoming is the property of the state, including shed antlers and horns located on state and public lands. It is the purpose of this act and policy of the state to provide an adequate and flexible system for control, propagation, management, protection, and regulation of all Wyoming wildlife. There shall be no private ownership of live animals classified in this act as being big or trophy game animals or any wolf or wolf hybrid. And the suggestion was that we add, there shall be no private ownership or possession of live animals classified in this act. And I'm wondering if Director Nesvik has a comment on that.
Yeah, so there's some, if that was the intent of the committee, there would need to be quite a bit more work done where there would be conflicts with other statutes. So as an example, it is legal for a game bird farm owner to possess live wildlife for their game bird farm. And if with that language that you read, that your constituent recommended, that would create a conflict in statute that we'd have to resolve so that somebody could continue to have a bird farm, or if the intent is that that practice becomes illegal as well, we'd have to deal with that. There are people that are currently, I don't know how common it is. It is legal for people to propagate fur bearers. So for example, to get a permit from the department and possess a bobcat, as an example, that's a fur bearer. And so we'd have to resolve some of these places where people actually can possess live wildlife right now.
So even where it says big or trophy game animals or any wolf or wolf hybrid, that doesn't exempt all those other things?
No, the way it right now, the existing language only covers those animals. So a pheasant and a pheasant farm is a game bird, so it doesn't fall into those other definitions. But the way I understood what you were discussing adding was basically a prohibition against possessing any live wildlife.
No, I'm just suggesting that we just add in that last sentence where it refers to big game, trophy game, and any wolf or wolf hybrid, is that we add no private ownership or possession
Oh, okay.
of live animals classified as big or game trophy game animals or wolves or wolf hybrids.
Adding that one word of possession.
Just possession.
Yeah.
Senator, who is your, sorry, is your, okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm thinking right now about that. Let me noodle on that for a minute. I don't see right now off the top of my head, I don't see a problem there with ownership or possession. I mean, in Wyoming law right now, it's defined really the same way for the purposes of wildlife. So I'm going to look at the statute right now and
Okay,
take a rain check.
it's 23-1-103.
Okay.
Okay, we can circle back to that when we're actually working the bills too. So, Ms. Johnson.
I was curious about the definition, or if we use the word humane in any other part of the statute, just because it seems like one of those nebulous words that could mean a lot of things to different people, much like how we struggle to legislate ethics. I'm curious if there's a definition, or if we've used humane before, and how we've sort of lined that out.
I believe that Luke has the answer to that question, as I had asked of him earlier.
Madam Chair, Ms. Johnson, humane is not specifically defined in statute. It's used a few times, only a handful of times. I believe it's 4 or 5 instances. I'll touch on that briefly when we get to the next bill draft. There is a reference to humane treatment within the title of the animal abuse statutes. It's Wyoming Statute 6.3/1008 does allow for the use of agriculture and livestock management practices, wildlife management, and humane destruction. There's a reference related to prisoners that they have to be treated humanely, but it's only used a few times, and there's not a specific definition of humane in statute.
This is Jim, and before we go on, Representative Newsom, could you read that language once again that you had just proposed to us?
Sure, it's in 23-1-103. And it's the very last sentence of that particular section. And it says, there shall be no private ownership of live animals classified in this act as big or trophy game animals or any wolf or wolf hybrid. So what I'm proposing is, after private ownership, we add possession.
My question would be actually with regard to the existing language. I could see that as applying to wolves in the area where wolves are protected, but if you get into the predator zone, I'm questioning why we want to define wolf as in any way distinct from coyote or another predatory animal.
I could answer that.
Oh, good.
So Jim, I think that goes back about 2 or 3 decades to when there were challenges and problems with people breeding wolf dog hybrids and selling them. And I believe that's when that came to be in statute to prohibit that practice.
Well, I appreciate that, Brian. And I guess um, if we were to do anything with that section of the statute, maybe we need to give some consideration as to whether that is still needed or whether it's appropriate under today's circumstances.
All right, well, let's take that up as we work the bills in a little bit. If we don't have an answer at the moment, so.
So
Luke, why
Madam
don't-
Chair, if I may, just if the desire of the committee is to go a little different direction there, we're going to need a little time to work it because
Okay,
we would not want to open the door, at least from Game and Fish perspective, we would not want to open the door for it to be legal to do to work in the practice of breeding wolves and dogs to make wolf dog hybrids to sell. That's been problematic in the past. It's been a long time, but we have had incidents of that in the past, and it's usually not good.
okay, thanks. That's helpful. Any other comments on the question of the private ownership for the moment? Okay, Luke, if you would maybe walk us through 140 then.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. The next bill is 25 LSO 140. This is animal abuse, predatory animals. And so it is similar to the previous bill draft. It just does it in a different section of statute within Title VI, which is the Crimes and Offenses title, specifically within the section on cruelty to animals. And so for Wyoming Statute 63-1002, it creates a new subsection B, which states that any person who intentionally injures or disables a predatory animal is defined by Wyoming Statute 23-1-101A8, which is the definition in the Game and Fish statutes, by use of an automotive vehicle, propelled wheeled vehicle, or vehicle designed for travel over snow, shall, upon inflicting the injury or disability, immediately use all reasonable efforts to kill the injured or disabled predatory animal. Any person who fails to immediately use all reasonable efforts to kill an injured or disabled predatory animal is required by this subsection commits cruelty to animals. And the staff comment on the bottom of bottom half of page 2, continuing on to page 3, is substantially similar to the one for the prior bill draft, just discussing considerations for the term of vehicle, including snowmobile, and also that the working group may wish to consider further defining terms such as use all reasonable efforts. And so at the bottom of page 3 is the title for Wyoming Statute 63-1004, and this is the penalties provision for cruelty to animals. And it's being amended for a first offense of cruelty to animals, or for a violation of another statute, is a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment for not more than 6 months, a fine of not more than $1,000 instead of $750, or both, in order to match the Game and Fish low misdemeanor. And then in Wyoming Statute 63-1008, as I mentioned in our discussion on the term humane, we include here, it's humane is used in the title. It is also used once in, well, I had it pulled up. It's in one of the other sections to say to allow for the humane destruction of an animal. But specifically in A7, it's that the hunting, capture, killing, or destruction of any predatory animal, pest, or other wildlife in any humane manner not otherwise prohibited by law is not prohibited under these statutes. This section 2, being on line 18 of page 4, is the same applicability section, that this shall only apply to any person who intentionally injures or disables a predatory animal on and after July 1st, 2025. And then this also has an effective date of July 1st, 2025. With that, I'd stand for any questions on the second bill. Madam Chair, I would just note, these two bills do create substantially the same penalty and, like prohibit substantially the same conduct. So it may be in the interest of the working group to choose a bill or to make a recommendation for one over the other, just to avoid any potential double jeopardy concerns.
I'm curious whether there is a good reason to go with both, or not. And just, I would refer to my, my senior legislative members here, if there's a good reason to look in one place or the other. Or I guess the question of double jeopardy, if you're creating two separate penalties versus just mirroring language in both places, I guess which is kind of how I looked at it. Representative Newsom.
So is my feeling that someone who did this could be charged under both these statutes. And so I guess the question would be, if you wanted to run them both, if one passed, then you'd pull the other one. But if one didn't pass, then you'd keep the other one in play. But I would be reluctant to have them both pass, because then there's the possibility that somebody could be charged twice under different statutes for exactly the same crime.
All right, thanks for that. I think to the degree we could make a recommendation on one or the other probably makes sense, or the TRW committee could do that perhaps.
Madam Chair, this is Jim McGagnon again, and of course, I'm the one who originally proposed the recommendation in Title VI. And just by way of a bit of background, and I'm fine with either one. I certainly do not want to see both of them and be passed. But the reason I did that is in thinking of the activity that we're trying to address, which could take place, at least with the snow machine, anytime during snow months, and that when game and fish personnel are not necessarily going to be out in these areas. I was thinking if we had another abuse similar to what we saw, that it might be more likely that a county sheriff would be involved, or in particular that a county prosecuting attorney, and I don't have any proof of this, but just a sense, may be more likely to pursue charges of a violation of Title VI, which they deal with more regularly, than they would be to pursue a violation of Title 23. And that was the thinking behind it, but I'm happy with whatever the group would decide.
All right, thanks for that. Senator Gort.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too agree with Mr. McGagnon on his reasoning on that. But what I wanted to do, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Director, but I'd like to hear what Director Nesvik, what his thoughts on that was. And since he has his hand up anyway, there you go. Maybe he'll tell us.
Well, thanks, Senator. So, you know, a county sheriff currently would have the ability to enforce either one of these statutes. But a game warden would not, under current statute and their definition of a peace officer, would not have the ability to enforce the Title VI statute unless the definition of peace officer was changed for game wardens. So that's something I think the committee should concern. The other thing that I need to verify, but I believe that the Title VI charge does have enhanced penalties for subsequent violations, if I'm not mistaken. So there could be a phased or a ramped up potential for higher penalties under 6. The other thing that I wanted to add was I totally understand the intent behind the word humane, but I think about many days sitting in a prosecutor's office or sitting in front of a judge and how helpful or sometimes not so helpful it's been when terminology is in statute that's not broadly understood by most people. And humane means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I don't think humane does have a fairly common understanding by folks. You know, I will just tell you, there's certain folks that believe hunting is inhumane, and that's, I think that's quite a bit different from what the intent was with adding that word into these two statutes. So I just offer that to support what Jesse was talking about here a little bit earlier too.
Other comments
Madam
on,
Chairman,
yes.
this is
Representative
John Winter. It's my opinion that we should do away with the terms humane as has been advised, and also that to do away with the idea that Representative Newsom brought up relative to the wolf and the dogs and so forth. I forget what all that amounted to, but I think we need to do away with those particular terms, and as somebody said, to pick one of these bills and go with it, and then just see what happens. Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
I want to just, is now a good time, like, to ask about like the sort of how this is written out. I'm curious because we're really focusing in on, you know, because this is in reference to a specific incident, and that incident had a snowmobile in it. We've been zeroing in on just vehicle like abuse essentially. And I'm curious if there's an appetite to take out the vehicle specific stuff, just knowing that people can be creative in how we approach being bad. And if we just took out the vehicle specific part, but say, you know, anybody who intentionally injures or disables, you know, a predatory animal shall make every reasonable effort to, you know, essentially like that quick kill aspect, that broadens it out from just vehicle problem into a larger scope of how people can behave. I guess I'm asking if there's a will there, or are we stepping into things that, like, you know, maybe looking at you, Director Miyamoto or Magagna, is that going to, how's that going to play with us? I'm just thinking, like, I'm not one to do a piece of legislation off one specific incident, knowing that people have creative ways to get up at things. So making sure that we stay broad in how we address stuff feels like the right way to approach it. But obviously you can go too broad and then you tread into places that you don't mean to go. I guess I'm asking, like, is there a will there to pull just the vehicle specific stuff out and go larger and just say, hey, like, you know, if you are intentionally injuring and disable an animal, it is your responsibility to put it out of its misery quickly.
Right. So as to say, under any circumstances.
Yeah, and I, looking at the directors of these agencies, you know, I don't know how that's going to play out, but are you guys seeing any issues with that, or is there any like immediate red flags there?
Director Miyamoto?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Nothing immediately comes to mind as to why, you know, the vehicle specific language is needed. You know, most of the predator management activities that take place to address animal damage, the goal is obviously to dispatch those animals as quickly and as humanely as possible. So nothing comes to mind, but it is something that I would want to explore a little bit more. I've been talking to my partners at USDA as well, and would consider, or would like the opportunity to do that again if that were to be changed.
Senator Garreau.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I wanted to follow up with the director about something he said before getting off on what Ms. Johnson was talking about, if that's okay with you, Madam Chair, just real quick. Thank you. Director, you were talking about, you know, if we were in Title VI, we'd have to add game wardens into that criminal, be able to address the criminal statutes. Does that, would that then, by doing that, opening that up, then game wardens would be all the way through the criminal statutes, or just in this instance? I mean, is there, in other words, is there an unintended consequence from adding that, or I mean, where were you headed with that? That's my question, or did I misunderstand?
No, you understood me well, Senator. Thank you. So my strong recommendation would be, if we went down that road and we wanted game wardens to be able to enforce that we very, very specifically and surgically put this statute into the definition of a peace officer, so that then game wardens would gain authority for one statute, not all of Title VI. I don't think it's in the best interest of our department or that position for game wardens to be enforcing all of Title VI. They have plenty to do with Title 23 and 41 as it is. We do have examples of that. One example I'll tell you is that littering, as an example, is a Title VI statute, and it is currently included in the definition of a peace officer game warden, so the game wardens can enforce that specific statute that's not within Title 23 or 41. So to answer your question is, yes, it would require one change, but it would be very specific and keep game wardens out of all the rest of Title VI.
I'll do one more quick follow-up, Representative, that would be helpful. Okay, so going back to Mr. Magagna's thought about leaving it in 6, so that way a sheriff can. Do you think that in and of itself is worth doing it that way, and then doing that surgical right to get game wardens in it? Would that be, in your view, looking at these two bills as they sit right now? Then I'll get to Ms. Johnson's comments, but would that be a way you would consider as a good way to go?
I think we can easily make both of these options work. The only thing I see that might have some advantage with Title VI is the enhanced penalties with subsequent violations.
That's another thing I like. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for that. And then, sorry, Jess, I'll let you get back to that. Real quick, I do think there's some merit to taking out the vehicle aspect of it, as you suggested. With that, thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Grew.
So the one thing I would add, if I could, real quick to that point, is again, we're using some definitions here that are left open to interpretation. I don't think we're going to get away from that. So don't take my comments to mean that we should start over on any of this. But when we talk about make all reasonable, I better use the right language here, make all reasonable efforts to kill an injured or disabled predatory animal, that reasonable effort looks very different from somebody who is legitimately using, for example, a snow machine to do predator control. Not even the act of running the animal over. I'm not saying that at all, but they're using a snow machine, and for whatever reason, there's not a good shot and the animal's maimed or wounded. It's a different, reasonable is different for that person on the ground on a snow machine than it would be for somebody that's in an airplane. And is it reasonable then that the airplane has to go land if they know that the animal was wounded? And I think that's one reason why keeping it to the current definition might be easier for those folks that are engaged in predator management to comply. We don't want to criminalize otherwise legal behavior with the statute. So that I just throw that out for the committee's consideration.
Director Nesbitt, which definition are you referring to?
The definition with regards to reasonable efforts to kill, because that directly ties to Jesse's proposal to consider removing the vehicle portion of the current draft. To just leave it at any person who intentionally injures or disables a predatory animal, and then take out the vehicle portion.
Yeah.
Under this current language here, it would just not apply to aircraft. And so that it would then, if we removed the stuff related to vehicle, it would then include aircraft. That's my concern.
Okay, right. But when you were, okay, I understand what you're saying.
Is that something we can exempt, with the exemption of aircraft? I'm just thinking of like, we're wanting
Absolutely.
legal behavior legal, but yeah, I hear you on that.
No, I think absolutely it could be addressed.
Yeah, and I guess I would argue that the language reasonable effort would also essentially cover the ability to, what you can do from an aircraft, given the situation. Mr. McGann.
Yes, I had a similar thought, but not focused on the word reasonable, but focused on the word immediate. If I'm setting live traps and I'm required by another law to check my traps every 7 days, and a wolf is trapped in there or a coyote, what does immediate mean in those contexts? Does it mean day 8, or does it mean I need to check every day or every 6 hours? Similarly, I've actually seen examples of where a group of
Uh-oh.
We lost your audio, Jim.
Representative Storr, I do have a little bit of an answer with that. If we pull the vehicle part out, the vehicle part is specific to that. And I think if we want to create a new subsection C, we need the vehicle part in it because it keeps it specific. If we pull the vehicle part out, we need to put it back in subsection A. So it is right before the exemption to the trapping statutes, because then it is beholden to the trapping statute exemption. And then that gives that 72-hour check. It also allows for the release of bycatch and things like that. So if we pull the vehicle part out, we need to move it to subsection A. And that subsection A takes care of all that trapping concern because it has that exemption written into subsection A. But if we leave the vehicle stuff in, it does need to be its own subsection C, because then it is specific enough that it does not touch trapping.
Gotcha. All right. Let's we can ponder that for a few minutes while we any other comments specifically to 10140 here. Senator Group, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we were talking about, before I leave it, we're talking about the word humane and not being defined anywhere. Is there another term, another word, another term, Luke? This would be for Lucas, Madam Chair, that is defined in statute that might get us to that, get us to that goal of wanting to address, use a word like humane, but a word that's defined in statute.
Madam Chair, Senator Guru, that's a good question that I haven't fully explored, and something's not coming to me right off the top of my head, but I could look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. I just have a comment on that. Again, the word is used in the context in 631008 in the title. And actually, as Director Miyamoto just said, I think a few minutes ago, that often the goal is to dispatch an animal as quickly and humanely as possible. So in some ways, I do think that we kind of know it when we see it. We understand what that word means. We could certainly, TRW could consider, or a later date, we could look at what the word humane, come up with a definition. There's certainly lots of definitions out there that I think go to the heart of this issue. And I think it's also reflective of the conversation we had in June, where essentially we were talking about the need to discriminate between what is a humane effort that is necessary for predator management, but is different than recreational killing that I think continues to concern the public. So I actually think it is a conforming amendment to include it, and it makes sense, even if it's not defined at this point in time. So I'd say we don't all we can all mull these things over for a little bit while we also take a little bit of time, a bit of a break, and hear from the public at this point in time. And I did request that the folks from Wyoming or work in Wyoming have the first shot at this. And Heather, I sent you a list. Hopefully you've got, but I had Cindy Campbell was at the top of the list. Here we go. All right. Welcome, Cindy. Cindy, let's see. We can see your a photograph. We're not hearing you quite yet.
Okay, there we go. Sorry.
Excellent. Thank you.
My voice is quivering because I get very nervous speaking. And I'm going to go because my comment is over 2 minutes. My name is Cindy Campbell. I'm a 50-year resident in the state of Wyoming. I've been working on wildlife issues at the local and state level for over 3 decades. I'm not new to the topic, nor am I an outsider. Some of you have heard from me right after the heinous wolf torture incident in Daniel and recently. It's clear from recent reports of similar events that we need stronger regulations, which you're working on, surrounding the treatment of all wildlife, including predatory animals. The belief that supporting new legislation could be construed as slippery slope is simply inaccurate, does not take the full scope of the situation into account. It's clear and simple. We need good folks like yourselves, guardians whom we have entrusted with our precious Wyoming lands and wildlife, to enact new statutes and bolster others in ways that truly represent the values and morals of my great state. The intentional taking and possession of that young wolf in Daniel, Wyoming, and every perverse act inflicted upon it afterwards is on all of us if action is not taken now. Merely toughening up language to ensure a quicker kill is nowhere near the solution. I know you guys are working on something deeper than that. There has been more than sufficient evidence brought forth since the Daniel incident that proves this was far from an isolated incident. With the new and ongoing evidence showing just how common these atrocious acts are and all the ones that go unrecorded, we must act now. All Wyoming wildlife deserves the same protection as our beloved dogs, cats, livestock, and trophy game animals. I have proposed that I believe that these abuses should be punishable by felony animal cruelty. The ruthless activity needs to stop. If there are folks in the ag business, I have a lot of friends in that business, using a snowmobile to run down, maim, or kill an animal as part of their livestock operation, they need to stop this barbaric practice and learn how to properly use a firearm. I know many that do. A $250 slap on the wrist is reprehensible. The punishment for this torturous behavior must be increased. It's offensive that our state does not have specific and harsher felony animal cruelty statutes that address these despicable acts against all Wyoming wildlife. Omitting predatory animals from this protection is shameful and wrong, and it defiles the basic human decency of our citizens. We are nowhere near the gold standard in wildlife management unless we dissuade this appalling behavior and make bold moves that truly represent my state and our state wildlife management values. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Cindy. I think next up we have Kristen Combs, representing Wyoming Wildlife Advocates.
Great. Can you see and hear me okay? Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Chairman, and members of the Treatment of Predators Working Group for speaking today. The two bills that are currently up for discussion do not address the fact that a recent poll showed that 73% of people in the state of Wyoming consider chasing down and running over an animal with a snowmobile to be considered animal cruelty. People's attitudes about animal cruelty are clear and they don't support it here. And it's also kind of been assumed that all coyotes and wolves near a ranch must be killed in order for livestock to be protected. What I haven't heard yet is the science explaining why killing coyotes and wolves is ineffective, because they breed more when a vacuum is left in the ecosystem. The more you kill, the more there will be in the future. And so this kind of perpetuates a system where we just have, more animals coming into that slot. So instead of repeated killing, especially using particularly cruel methods, why wouldn't we explore other options and end the cruelty now? In a previous meeting, it was said that tools for predator management keep being taken away from livestock producers. But I would say that there's an entire other toolbox out there that has not been explored or embraced by livestock producers in Wyoming the way that it has been in other states. Things like range riders, carcass removal, drones, fox lights, illuminated livestock guardian dog collars, low-stress livestock handling, and others have not been used widely in Wyoming yet. These are all new and emerging tools that can be employed right away with financial assistance from non-governmental organizations. We stand as one of those organizations willing to help with cost and implementation. Similar to how we no longer use rotary phones, our grandchildren would do things differently than we do, and we're setting that up right now for them. This committee is exploring solidifying into law running over an animal with a vehicle. However, it is not considering other options that are very much more viable and working well in other places across the American West. So I would encourage you to think carefully about the language that's put into these bills, that it doesn't make it legal to run over an animal with a vehicle. Please do not move forward with this legislation as it stands. Please amend this bill to remove codifying running down an animal and continue to pursue legislation that all wildlife should continue to be killed humanely. Please have the courage to think about protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. They are relying on us. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. And thank you for being succinct. Sorry, trying to figure out my timer here. I think we have Kelly Ravner from Pinedale up next.
Hi, can you see and hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
thank you. Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much, Ms. Ravner.
Hi, so my name is Kelly Ravner. I'm from Pinedale, Wyoming, born and raised. I believe that your proposed legislative changes do not do enough to protect Wyoming's predators. This committee exists because of an incident that happened in Daniel. I find it astonishing that you don't want to be reminded of that at all. But what happened there needs to be made illegal with real penalties. The proposed change in fines would have had no effect at all on that particular case and does not impose an actual increase in the possible fine. It just makes two very weak statutes match. That is just the definition of doing nothing. The most obvious issue here, the low-hanging fruit, is that you could make whacking, the torturing and killing of animals with motorized vehicles, illegal. Whacking is not fair chase, it is not hunting, and it has no place in actual wildlife management. It is not the gold standard of management. Also, there was a question about why wolves need specific protections. I've been here for decades. I've listened to people tell themselves ridiculous fairy tales about wolves killing everything. I heard people talking about the proposal to return wolves to Yellowstone and saying that everything in Yellowstone was going to be killed, that there wouldn't be elk, there wouldn't be bison left. Those are ridiculous fairy tales that people still believe. And wolves have been the target of particular vitriol in Wyoming. So they need specific protection. So you need to keep language protecting wolves in the statutes. Wyoming needs to stop pretending that unlimited slaughter of random wolves and other predators is any kind of management tool. So let's start using known facts about biology and behavior and use proven livestock management best practices to guide our laws. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ravner. Still working on my timer over here, but you guys are doing a great job. AJ Cargill from Jackson.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman. I would say I would agree strongly with the previous speakers, especially the last one, in that these are not isolated incidents. There are abilities to manage predatory wildlife much more effectively, as has been proven in Colorado with a few cases. These are vulnerable animals, and I would like to see a much, much stronger punishment and a much more robust language around. I think whacking is a good idea, and just around the protection of these animals specifically. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ashea Mills.
Hi, and thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to comments. I agree wholeheartedly with prior speakers, but I have a slightly different tack to introduce. My name is Ashea Mills, and I live in Gardner, Montana, and have lived in or on the edge of Yellowstone since '95. I own a small educational guiding business operating in the park. The majority of my working life is in the state of Wyoming. I'm a mother. I'm also a supporting member of Wild Livelihoods, a Park County, Montana-based business coalition whose livelihoods depend on wild places. We represent thousands of individual employees and supporters in Montana and around 200 businesses. We work closely with the Gardner Chamber and also Explore Livingston Coalition. We're ranchers, hunters, outfitters, guides, restaurateurs, lodging facility and gas station owners, and more. Our desire to conduct business in cohesive, novel way across neighborhoods and political alignments has led to a powerful new paradigm whereby we work together at what benefits us all, including working lands, open space and clean water, families, schools, our jobs, rich soil and native plants, and vibrant wildlife for all. I could talk at length about intrinsic, ecological, cultural, and scientific value of wolves, but as we all know, money talks. Based on a 22 independent study, visitors to Yellowstone and the surrounding area spend more than $236 million annually. In my fairly small county, there's only about 18,000 people in Park County, Montana. It creates over 3,000 jobs, about 1 in 5 jobs across the county. Statewide in 2023, 1 in 12 workers in Montana are supported by out-of-state travel, accounting for almost $5.5 billion of our state economy. Locally, we have a robust year-round wildlife viewing economy affecting everything from guiding businesses like mine to restaurants, gas stations, and lodging facilities. I did send in comments with some other numbers that speak to the 4.5 million visitors to Yellowstone, spending $623 million in communities near the park, cumulative benefits totaling about $828 million. For some reason, Wyoming refuses to see the potential economic benefit of predators, wolves included. The tarnished reputation splashed across international headlines comes home to roost in comments on Yellowstone trip planning pages across social media like, quote, fly into Denver or drive from across the country and cross Wyoming, but do not spend a dime till you get to the park. These travelers are and should be supporting your local economies as they make their way across Wyoming. My hope is that Wyoming follows our example of changing the way we do business. If you use data and your own business intelligence, you'd actually make more money by instituting the barely reasonable amendments to state predator policies discussed today. I would like to see them strengthened. Please continue to strengthen these amendments and protection towards your game, predator or otherwise. From our website, Wild Livelihoods, we put our money where our mouth is and our heart where our treasure is. We embrace ideas like fair chase, leave no trace, catch and release, live off the land. We also recognize the challenge of loving a place to death. Please do not be swayed by a vocal minority stuck in a 19th century Western mindset. Please, I encourage you all to join the ranks of us who care to create robust local economies based on perpetuating what is good and improve what could be better for our community, our landscapes, our wildlife, and the future of our children. I do believe we can do this. I appreciate all of you and all of your thoughts and nuance towards this sensitive issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. Taylor Phillips from Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Taylor Phillips. I founded and own a touring company here in the northwest corner of the state. We interact with over 8,000 visitors from around the world annually. We provide jobs to over 34 individuals, high-paying jobs with health benefits, et cetera. And as we all know, wildlife is a driving force of Wyoming's second largest economy, Wyoming's travel and tourism economy. And our large carnivores across the state are certainly a part of that collection of wildlife that drives the economy. Wyoming, the tourists that visit Wyoming expect that Wyomingites and others have a sound ethical interaction with all wildlife species. Wyoming's travel and tourism economy, we can't afford to have wildlife management policies that allow unethical treatment of animals. And we need to be seen as a state as having, sound and ethical, a strong conservation ethic. So the future of the health of our own tourism economy is at stake here. I love the idea of defining, humanly take and ethically taking animals. And I think there needs to be, strong verbiage that speaks to, removing, snowmobiles and other vehicles as ways to take these animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Kim Bean from Cheyenne. Sorry, that was.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
There we are. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. It is my understanding that this group was assembled to propose a positive ethical path forward for Wyoming. The recommendations I have before me today barely address the magnitude of what needs to be addressed. The group seems to sidestep the obvious issue and continues to cater to special interests by allowing the same behavior to persist. Using vehicles to chase down and run over native carnivores and other animals is not and should not be considered a tool for managing livestock or any form of management. Years ago, laws were passed by legislators representing ethical hunters that prohibit hunting using motor vehicles to pursue game species, as it was deemed to be against fair chase principles. Here we are facing the same ethical questions of fair chase, abuse, torture, and cruelty. Why is there a double standard for native carnivores that provide a crucial benefit to ecosystems by controlling rabbits, gophers, prairie dog, and rodent populations? Simply slapping a Band-Aid on a gaping wound won't suffice. We cannot condone the recreational killing of wildlife by allowing such behavior to continue. If someone deliberately runs over an animal, they intend to cause pain. This is torture, this is abuse, this is cruelty. I genuinely fail to comprehend the disconnect with this. This is my home state, And it's time for legislation to mirror the views of the majority of voters who believe that animal torture in any form should be illegal. Let's outlaw motor vehicle killing of wildlife, update and strengthen the animal abuse laws in the state to include wildlife, and create a substantial fine and jail time for anyone who defies those laws. Now is the time. The dust on this is not going to settle. We need to bring Wyoming into the present and change our animal abuse laws. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Ms. Bean. Brett Moline is next.
Committee, Madam Chairman, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. To keep my comments specific as you asked to the legislation in front of you, between the two choices, I would probably prefer 139, or excuse me, 140. Either one of them will work. I think we need to keep the tools that we have that are economical. Strengthening these penalties is a good idea. I would also ask that we keep it, as these pieces of draft legislation do, keep it specific to motorized vehicles. As we have to keep it narrow will make for better legislation. If we get it too broad, it could become unworkable. So I appreciate that these are very specific to motorized vehicles. Supporting probably both bills. I think just one of them should go forwards, but I think the draft 140 would probably be a better bill to go with. And with that, I would sit for any questions you or the committee may have for me.
Any questions for Mr. Moline? And Brett, I have one question, if I could, just for clarification, I guess. I've read in comments that the number of the amount of sheep depredation is a relatively low number in the state. And I'm just curious why that is. Is it because folks feel that preemptively addressing predators has been successful? Is it because and are you seeing a lower number of predators as a result of that work, or are those numbers consistent? Sorry.
Representative, it really ebbs and flows. You'll have years that are much higher than other years. It's weather dependent. I think that's one thing that our current predator management system, we've learned a lot of things over the years. We target areas where instead of doing a broad scale control, we target areas where the animals are, where the sheep will be. And a lot of my members are using guard dogs. Those help. I think we have a very good program and it's very effective. And I think that drop in predator loss is reflective of we've got a good program that's working. I will say one thing, that my members don't expect to have zero losses. Having animals, especially different types of animals, you realize you're going to lose some to predators. So it's not that we want to eliminate predators. We want to keep the losses down to an economical level. If you're losing 1 or 2%, it hurts. You don't want to see your animals suffer, any animal suffer. But when you start getting up to, in some areas, some producers that are losing 20, 25%, that's uneconomical. That's not sustainable. It's a business. We have to have a positive net income. So I think with the lower predator losses that we're seeing, I think that's indicative that we've got a program that's effective and it works. And I will point out, in many instances, the wildlife are benefiting from predator control as well. With that, I hope I answered your question, man.
Thanks. I'm just curious too. I'm trying to understand. Do you feel like there's more of an impact from aerial predator management versus on the ground?
Well, Representative, it's really dependent on the area. If you have wide open spaces where airplanes can fly, using aircraft is very effective. But when you get into an area where aircraft can't be, and in more heavily timbered, rougher country, that's where the use of other machines becomes more effective.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Moline? Thanks for joining us, Brett.
Thank you for having me.
Shane Moore from Jackson.
You got me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for taking public comment on this issue. I wanted to start by saying that, I grew up in Wyoming. I'm a lifelong hunter, and I fully realize that there are times and places where ranchers face predation problems, and I fully support, responsible management response. Do I sympathize with a rancher that's defending livestock from predators? Absolutely. But that's a far different issue than allowing the public to joyride on snowmobiles and torture wildlife legally on public lands, which is precisely what's happening, currently in Wyoming. The bulk of coyote whacking in Wyoming isn't occurring from ranchers and farmers protecting their livestock. It's being done by people. It's being done by people that are joyriding. It's sort of legalized sport torture. And in Wyoming, it's state sanctioned and fully legal. If Wyoming's response to the wolf incident in Daniel allows for these practices to continue, including motorized killing, I believe Wyoming will become increasingly isolated and ostracized by a public that demands wildlife be treated with respect. Most people support wildlife management, but most also despise wildlife abuse. The lack of substantive change following the Daniel incident seems to be suggesting that Wyoming believes the problem wasn't that the wolf was pursued, traumatized, and wounded with a snowmobile. The problem was only that it took too long before the wolf was ultimately killed. And I strongly disagree. It seems that Wyoming will be allowing wildlife torture to continue with motorized killing if either of these provisions passes. As long as it's not prolonged. Will there be a time limit on a snowmobiler, pursuing a coyote? How will that be enforced? If we fail to act responsibly by ending the legal killing of wildlife with motorized vehicles in Wyoming, incidents like the Daniel episode will surely reoccur. If it remains legal, we will surely see more of it on social media, and the state of Wyoming will be complicit in this practice by keeping it legal. Wyoming is on the wrong side of history with its response to the wolf incident in Daniel so far. It looks like we're trying to find the minimal response that'll make it seem like we're doing something. Are we going to continue to be a state where we let legalized wildlife torture define us to the rest of the world? I hope not. Let's look for effective ways to protect livestock that also allows us to be proud of the way that we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. We've got let's see, I did not keep track of our entire time that we've been taking public comment. Luke, did you guys happen to note?
Madam Chair, I believe it's been about 25 minutes.
All right, so we'll take a couple more. Helena Edelson, also I was trying to get a little diversity here from Jackson. And then we'll have one more.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Good afternoon, members of the working group. My name is Helena Edelson. I'm a resident of Wyoming, president of Large Carnivore Fund. To clarify, this isn't a reaction to a specific incident. It's a behavior that happens all the time in our state. We support legislation preventing the patterns of animal abuse, including carnivore species. The proposed bill wording and increasing the maximum penalty for cruelty to animals. But we don't feel that what's being proposed is enough. Idaho, for example, has found more success in deterring wildlife crimes by increased penalties than what you propose, specifically in total per violation ruling, felony charges, $1,000 criminal fines plus court fees, $2,800 in civil penalties, 100 hours community service, jail time, and license revocation for hunting, fishing, and trapping from 10 years to lifetime. Multiple actions outside the bounds of merely capturing and killing in a discrete hunting event, such as beating, torturing, prolonged trauma, captivity, and live transport, appear to be the definition of multiple counts of felony cruelty to animals under Wyoming statute and must extend as well to large carnivores. To actually penalize and deter, we recommend this working group add penalties of felony charges, fines, court fees, civil penalties, jail time, license revocation, and under the Wildlife Violator Compact, and quote, provides reciprocal recognition of the suspension of license privileges by the 39 other participating states to cover mobility of violators. We feel this is all very important and we would like to see these added as well. Just a personal note, I subsistence hunted when I was a resident in Alaska, but what we're talking about is not hunting. We're trying to prevent all of this from happening. I'm out every day in the state of Wyoming seeing wolves, bears as part of my lifestyle. It's why I moved here. I'm a stakeholder, and I just want to thank you all very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Edison. And we'll go with one more person, Glenda Meyer from Riverton. Ms. Meyer, we can't quite hear you yet. You appear to be muted. There we go. Thank you. And thanks to LSO, I took you out of order. So just for some geographical diversity. So thanks. We see you now. Welcome. Oh. We still can't hear you. Well, unfortunately, we aren't able to hear Ms. Meyer. Thank you for attempting to, and please submit some written comments if you so desire. I think with that, we're about at our limit for public comment. Okay. I thought I saw Director Nesbitt hold his hand up, but I think that was just a stretch. So, all right. So I'm going to try to summarize a little bit of what I think I heard, a bit of a preference for Title VI with some modifications. And I guess I'll ask if there's a motion that is, sorry, that is. $25 LSO 0140.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Brew. Do we have a second to move that bill? Representative Winter,
I would
second.
second Jim Magagna.
Thank you, Jim. Discussion.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please go.
I would propose an amendment that on page 2, line 6, the word humane be removed, and that on the second draft, so that's on the first bill. On the second bill, are we moving these at the same time, or are we doing this separate? I guess I wasn't clear.
Just in the interest of making a decision to go one way or the other, I felt like there was more support for working in the Title VI bill, which is 040. And so I thought we'd try to do that, see if we can get that to a place where a majority of the working group supports it. And then we can take up 0139 as well if there's interest in also moving that forward, unless anyone else has an alternative process that you'd like to propose.
I would ask Senator Drew if he was moving the Title VI bill or the first one.
Thank you. I was trying to move the Title VI one.
Okay, thanks. And I assume that was your second, Jim, for Title VI bill?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so then I propose an amendment, page 16. I'm sorry, page 4, line 16 of the bill that we're on, that we strike the word humane.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, surely, because I'm worried about how broad of a term it is and the use of it when we're getting down to the brass tacks of it. Although I really appreciate the sentiment, the word itself doesn't quite cover that for me.
Any other discussion?
Madam Chair.
Senator Guru?
Yeah, I agree. But what I do, I'll vote yes on the motion to remove, but I'll be looking for, I'm looking at you, Luke, as we kind of drift through the criminal statutes. If there's another word, if there's something in statute, in the criminal statutes right now that might get us in that ballpark that is more clearly defined, then we could add that as you know, when we get it to committee, if there's such out there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Guru. Any further discussion? I guess I'll ask for a show of hands in support of that amendment. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, that amendment passes. Other amendments?
Madam Chairman.
Representative Newsom.
Thank you. Director Nesbitt, what amendments would we need to make this enforceable by game and fish personnel?
So I can describe them, but I can't give you a specific citation or proposed wording yet because it's going to take some work to do that. But it would be in the definition of peace officer in title, I believe it's in Title 6, but it's going to take some work to do that. I wouldn't be prepared to give you a good solid answer today. You could give Lucas that direction though, and ask Luke to come up with something between now and the October meeting. That would be my recommendation.
Madam Chair, just if I may briefly, I've been trying to search for it. There's a few different definitions of peace officer in Wyoming statute, and I do believe I can even kind of recall the example that Director Nesbitt provided on like the littering statute. I just haven't found it yet, but I can work on finding that. And if it were to be a conceptual amendment, I could work that in.
Thank you, Luke. If it's the pleasure of the committee, we can ask LSO to provide us with some language that we can recommend separately to the TRW committee.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, I just found this. So it would be in actually Title 7. It's Luke, it's 72101. And it's subsection 4C. And that is game and fish law enforcement personnel qualified pursuant to these Wyoming statutes. And then it provides 4 categories for when Wyoming game and fish law enforcement personnel are qualified as a peace officer. That addition would have to go into that statute at that specific spot. And it would have to specifically point to this statute 63108, or I'm sorry, 631,008.
All right, duly noted.
Madam Chair, do you want that as a conceptual motion to be voted on, or is the committee okay with that, just to ask that that be brought to the next reading? What's your preference?
Yeah, I'm fine. We can go ahead and make it a conceptual motion.
And then I would move that we ask LSO to draft a conceptual motion to make sure that we allow game wardens to be able to enforce this statute in Chapter 6. Is that, I think, what we're trying to do, right? Okay.
Yes. You have a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Director Nesbitt. All in favor? Or further discussion? Any other further discussion? Oh, it seems like we have lots of hands. Motion carries. Jess, did you want to move the motion of taking out the vehicle piece and moving B to back into A?
So that would only work under the 23.3, the other bill, under the statute, the Title 23. Whereas on this Title 6 one, the 140 bill, I would love to move pulling that vehicle specific stuff out, but I think I have some things that I have to work through because now we have to add in the exemptions of trapping if you pull the vehicle specific stuff out. So we could take the exemptions from 23, what is it, 23.3, 23.3.103, that add in all of the sort of exemptions under the predatory stuff that would have the trapping and all of that kind of stuff in there. And then we would have to put them in this Title 6. And I'm uncomfortable because I don't know how that plays out yet. I have not. So while I would like to remove the vehicle specific stuff, I think at this time I don't have a good solution of language to bring forward to make sure that it is not touching on the trapping stuff, and it's still allowing for that kind of the stuff that we need to have in there. And I'm not sure how that would play with mixing the two there, and maybe that's something I can bring in October as an amendment if we move this bill forward. I will say that I was pretty against having stuff in this chapter 6, but after sort of this discussion and hearing about, we add in this peace officer description and this ability for the peace officer, the game wardens, to also weigh into this, as well as having perhaps a increased penalty for repeat offenders, things like that. I'm able to come around on this chapter 6 side of it. But yes, I would really like to pull the vehicle specific stuff out. I think we're codifying something kind of odd into statute in that way, but I'm not prepared with good language because I've not done it under this chapter 6 part yet. And so I can say I can bring that in October, and I would hope that the committee would be okay with that coming forward, or at least as an idea in October, but feel like it would be, I wouldn't have the tools to do it well right now.
Any other comments on that concept? Mr. McGagnon?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm certainly happy to take a look at that with Jess. I do have concerns. I think we agree on the trapping part, but there are so many ways in which a predatory animal can be taken. If you shoot it and don't kill it, how far do you have to pursue it to immediately put it out of its misery? If you riding a horseback, and I mean, I just think there's so many circumstances that I think it would be very challenging to, in this legislation, carefully identify what this would require under each of those different methodologies that may come into play for hunting a predatory animal. But I certainly would be happy to look at it prior to that meeting if Jess chooses to bring it forward.
Well, Jim, you've certainly been fantastic at that. So I would really take the help because you have an eye and catch things. So yes, if I bring it forward, we can work together and maybe find a good balance in that. And I appreciate that because you catch the things that I'm hoping to.
Okay, I think it sounds like maybe we wouldn't adopt that idea at this point in time. It's a little premature, but ask you to take a look at that, and if you think there's something that works, that can capture the idea that we don't want to limit this to vehicular injury necessarily, but we also want to make it so that it's a reasonable that people can, with a reasonable effort, follow the law, I guess is how I would put that. So thanks. Any other changes, any other amendments for 25 LSO 0140?
Just one quick note, Madam Chair, I just did some quick research here for Luke. So they actually, the way that this peace officer authority was addressed for littering is it's actually specifically in the littering statute. The last subsection says this can be enforced by game and fish law enforcement officers that are qualified pursuant to blah, blah, blah. So I just sent all that statutory reference to you, Luke, on an email.
Thank you, Director Nesbitt. I was just seeing that as well, was doing a little search. So yeah, thank you.
All right, so we could prepare an amendment to consider at TRW at the end of the month on that front. Cool. Okay. Any further discussion? Thanks. I guess I don't, because this is a working group, it's not clear to me how formal we are at having a vote on a bill, but if everyone's comfortable, I think we might as well just do a roll call.
Senator Baldwin,
Aye.
Senator Guru,
Aye.
Representative Winter,
Aye.
Representative Newsom,
Aye.
Director Nesvik,
Aye.
Director Miyamoto,
Aye.
Miss Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Magagna,
Aye.
Chairwoman Storr.
Aye. All right, thank you all. Does anyone want to move 25 LSO 0139? Is there a motion?
Chair,
Senator
I'd like
Bal-
to make a motion that we table the other bill for this period.
Is there a second? Senator Guru, seconds.
So can I ask a question before I just don't know procedurally. So it's either for Chairman Newsom or Senator Baldwin. So if it's tabled, does that mean that once the TRW interim committee concludes that it's just no longer considered, it's because it's tabled during the interim process, or does it actually remain tabled into the general session?
I might
believe
defer to Luke on that one.
Oh, yeah.
I think that it disappears.
I believe that it disappears. As this is a special working group. It's not actually a bill before the whole committee. And I don't know, Luke can tell us different, but I believe that it just disappears if we table it this time.
Madam Chair, and members of the working group, yes, if it's tabled at this time, I mean, there could be a request potentially at the full TRW meeting to consider it, but if the primary one, forwarded out of this working group is 25 LSO 0140, then that'd be the primary bill to be considered. And so yes, it essentially would go away unless anybody else wanted to, unless an individual legislator wanted to try and take up something similar.
Okay, so there's a motion to table the bill and a second. All in favor? One, two, 4, 5, 6. I guess that motion passes. Any other bills, considerations that anyone wants to bring forward? All right.
I had a question for Director Nesbitt, if you don't mind, Madam Chairman. So,
Sure.
Director, can any of this just be addressed in rule?
The substance of the changes that we've contemplated here today cannot, the commission does not have the authority to do those in rule.
Okay, so as we heard earlier on in the summer, this was a legislative issue, and the legislature has moved one bill forward. Representative Newsom, maybe just clarify for the working group how we will proceed at TRW.
So within our agenda, there is a line item for the working group to report. So Chairman Storr, I believe you would do that report and report on our bill. You can probably have Luke walk through the bill, but just report that this is the bill that we've decided as a working group to forward. And then the full committee will have discussion.
All right, sounds good. Very good. Well, thank you all for your efforts and time and thoughts. And we'll look forward to having a conversation in early October. All right, thanks.